She laughed. She actually laughed. There I was, down on one knee in the middle of a candlelit rooftop restaurant overlooking the Seattle skyline, the exact spot she'd said was the most romantic place in the city. I had a velvet box in my hand, a custom-cut diamond inside, my heart racing in my chest, and she laughed. Not nervous laughter. Not surprised laughter. It was a cold, dismissive laugh, the kind that makes your stomach drop and your skin burn with humiliation. I'll never forget how her lips curled into that smug little smile as she muttered, "This is not what I expected." The restaurant went silent. Forks paused midair. My chest felt hollow, like every ounce of air had been knocked out of me. And just like that, everything I thought I knew about love, about us, shattered into a million sharp little pieces on that rooftop floor. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came later, days after the proposal, when I uncovered the truth about what she'd really been doing behind my back. About the secret messages, the affair, the lies layered so deeply I started questioning my own reality. And just when I thought it couldn't get worse, she showed up at my apartment building, screaming at my intercom, mascara running down her face, pounding the buzzer like her life depended on it. "Jake! Please! I made a mistake. Just let me explain." But it was too late. I'd already seen who she really was, not in that moment on the rooftop, but in the weeks that followed, when the mask finally slipped. So if you've ever wondered how a love story turns into a survival story, if you've ever questioned whether someone truly loves you, or just loves what you provide, keep listening. Because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's a story about waking up. About reclaiming your self-worth. About choosing yourself even when it hurts like hell. And trust me, by the time we're done, you'll understand exactly how I went from the guy she laughed at to the man she'll regret losing for the rest of her life. What changed? Everything. Thank you for watching, brothers. If this story hit you in the gut, drop a 1 in the comments. I want to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this channel, because men like us, we don't chase chaos. We build peace. Looking back, it's almost laughable how perfect it all seemed in the beginning. We met at a friend's 4th of July barbecue 3 summers ago. I remember the smell of smoked ribs and cheap beer in red plastic cups, the hum of conversation and fireworks popping in the distance. But none of that mattered once I saw her, Emily, standing near the grill, laughing at some dumb joke with a sparkler in her hand. She had this easy confidence, the kind that pulled people in. And when our eyes met across the yard, it felt like the start of something significant, something real. Our chemistry was instant. Conversations flowed like we'd known each other forever. We shared the same sarcastic sense of humor, a mutual addiction to bad reality TV, and a love for Thai food that bordered on obsession. Within weeks, we were inseparable: weekend hikes, lazy Sunday mornings tangled in blankets, and late-night grocery runs that turned into mini-adventures. It was easy. It was effortless. It felt safe. Naturally, moving in together came next. By our 2nd year, we were renting a cozy 2-bedroom in Capitol Hill, small but full of character. The walls were decorated with prints from street markets we'd visited, Polaroids of spontaneous moments, and little notes we left each other around the apartment. "Don't forget your lunch, handsome," or "left you a cookie, love bug." Our fridge was a shrine to inside jokes and weekend plans. We were building a life, piece by piece, like 2 puzzle pieces that finally found their match. Then came Pepper. A rescue tabby with crooked whiskers and a weird obsession with shoelaces. He was the first real commitment we made as a couple. Emily had practically melted the moment she saw him at the shelter, his orange fur, big green eyes, tiny meows. I put a red ribbon around his neck and surprised her one evening after work. She cried. Happy tears. We curled up together that night, the 3 of us in bed, and she whispered, "This is it. This is what home feels like." At the time, I believed her. For a while, everything was blissfully normal, or so I thought. But somewhere between the grocery runs and lazy Sundays, subtle things began to shift. Emily started bringing up marriage, not in a direct way, but in those not-so-subtle suggestions that made it clear she was expecting a proposal soon. "Oh, look at this ring I saw on Instagram. Did you see Megan got engaged? Her fiancé planned this beautiful rooftop dinner, so romantic." At first, it was cute. Sweet, even. I'd catch her watching wedding videos on TikTok, humming along to sappy songs, sometimes dropping what-if comments during our weekend walks. What if we had a little backyard wedding, or what if we picked lavender for our color palette? I played along, imagining the possibilities, thinking it was just a phase, the way people romanticize milestones before they actually get there. But as time went on, those hints turned into pressure. She started showing me specific ring styles. Not too small, though. "A princess cut would look better on my hand, don't you think?" She'd talk about venues casually, like it was a given, even though we hadn't discussed an actual proposal timeline. One time she even left a Tiffany's catalog open on the kitchen counter, circled with post-it notes. I joked about it. She didn't laugh. Still, I loved her. I wanted that future. I thought maybe this was just her way of expressing it, indirectly, clumsily. So I started planning. The decision to propose wasn't impulsive. It was something I'd been thinking about for months, quietly saving for. I pulled double shifts on freelance projects, skipped weekend hangouts with friends, and built up a small fund to buy a ring I knew she'd be proud to wear. I did research, talked to jewelers, found the perfect princess-cut diamond she'd once shown me on Pinterest, dainty, elegant, understated but still radiant. I booked a reservation at the Aria, her favorite rooftop restaurant downtown. She'd once said it was the most romantic place she'd ever been. I timed it with the sunset. The plan was simple but heartfelt, an intimate dinner, followed by a surprise appearance from our close friends afterward to celebrate. The night of the proposal, I was a bundle of nerves and hope. My palms were sweaty, heart pounding. I had practiced what I was going to say 100 times in my head. I kept looking at her across the table, soaking in every smile, every laugh, thinking, this is going to be one of the best moments of our lives. So when I got down on one knee and opened the box, I was expecting tears of joy, not a pause. Not a flicker of annoyance. Not the silence that spread like wildfire across the restaurant. Not that laugh. That single, hollow, dismissive laugh that still echoes in my head. And just like that, the dream I had built, the life we had created, started to unravel right in front of me. In the hours after the proposal, I kept telling myself it was just a bad moment, that maybe she was overwhelmed, caught off guard, unsure how to react. That's what I wanted to believe. But deep down, something in me had already started to shift. The car ride home was quiet, thick with tension. She stared out the window, arms folded, like she wanted to be anywhere else but next to me. When I finally broke the silence and asked what was really going on, she sighed and said, "It's not just the ring. I told you I liked the Tiffany one, the one with the bigger stone." And honestly, that restaurant wasn't exactly romantic either. Her voice was calm, almost detached, like we were discussing takeout orders, not the fact that I'd just poured my heart out to her in front of a room full of strangers. I tried to stay grounded, to be understanding. "If it's the ring, I can exchange it," I offered, my voice catching slightly. She shook her head. "It's not just that," she said, still refusing to look at me. "Maybe we're just rushing things. Maybe we should wait a bit, make sure we're really ready." I didn't sleep much that night. She went straight to bed, barely said goodnight, while I stayed up on the couch with Pepper curled on my chest, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell just happened. But the real confusion began the next morning, when she acted like none of it mattered at all. If things had felt heavy the night before, now they felt eerily light. Too light. She was humming in the kitchen, sipping her coffee, scrolling her phone like everything was perfectly normal. At one point, she even kissed my cheek and said, "Maybe we can revisit the engagement later, once you've got a better plan." A better plan. The words sank in like lead. I didn't respond. I didn't know how. I just watched her walk out the door, her heels clicking against the hallway tiles, and felt a strange emptiness settling in my chest, like I was still standing on that rooftop, except this time, there was no audience. Just me, and silence. In the days that followed, the dissonance only grew louder. She became strangely distant and unusually cheerful at the same time, a combination that should have made me feel better, but somehow made me feel worse. She wasn't outright cold, but there was a shift, something off beneath the surface, like she was wearing a mask so well fitted, I almost couldn't tell it was fake. She started spending more time on her phone, scrolling with purpose, smiling subtly, but always angling the screen away from me. She'd take calls in the bedroom with the door closed, and if I asked who it was, she'd brush it off. Just work stuff. Nothing interesting. She also started working late more often. Before, she'd complain if meetings ran past 6. Now she didn't mind staying until 9. Sometimes even 10. And when she did come home, she'd be wired, not exhausted, like she'd just left a party, not a conference call. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking. That maybe she was just processing everything in her own way. That maybe she really did need time. But the more I tried to rationalize, the louder the voice in my head became, the one screaming at me that something wasn't right. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. I told myself relationships have rough patches. People get scared. Doubt creeps in. But that voice in my head wouldn't shut up. And then came the moment I couldn't ignore. It was a Tuesday night. I was on the couch, scratching Pepper behind the ears, half watching a rerun of some old sitcom while Emily was upstairs taking a shower. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. I wasn't trying to snoop, I swear to God I wasn't. But my eyes caught the name glowing on the screen. Brandon. I hesitated. Then the message preview appeared beneath it. Can't wait for Friday, our usual spot. My stomach twisted. My hands froze. Brandon? I didn't know any Brandon. She'd never mentioned one. And what the hell was our usual spot supposed to mean? She never said anything about a Friday lunch. No team outing. No meeting. No work friend by that name. Before I could react, I heard the water stop upstairs. I quickly sat back, tried to look natural, even though my heart was pounding in my chest like a war drum. She came down in a robe, hair damp, phone already in her hand before I could say a word. She glanced at the screen, smiled faintly, and locked it without a word. I forced myself to speak. Who's Brandon? She didn't flinch. Just a coworker. We have a team lunch Friday, she said casually, walking into the kitchen. I nodded, but something inside me cracked. She didn't know it, but in that moment, something changed. I wasn't just a boyfriend anymore. I wasn't the man planning a future. I was a man preparing for war, and for the first time since that rooftop, I was finally starting to see clearly. I tried to shake it off. I really did. After seeing the message from Brandon, I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe it really was a work lunch. Maybe our usual spot was just some cafe they liked. Maybe, just maybe, I was projecting my insecurities onto her. But deep down, I knew better. And fate has a cruel way of confirming the truths we try so hard to deny. A few days later, I decided to work from a coffee shop near our apartment, a little indie place called Marlowe's. Emily always said the coffee there was too bitter and overpriced, so I figured it was the safest place to work undisturbed. I grabbed my headphones, laptop, and settled into a quiet booth near the back, hidden partly by a tall potted plant. I was halfway through reviewing client reports when I heard a familiar voice, low, bright, unmistakably hers. Emily. I froze, unsure if I was imagining it. But a second later, I saw her walk in, wearing the same beige trench coat she'd left the apartment in that morning. She wasn't alone. Her best friend, Tara, was with her. Neither of them noticed me tucked in the corner. I was about to wave, maybe even say hi, but then I heard my name. Jake really thought I'd say yes, Emily said, her voice laced with a mocking chuckle that made my stomach turn. Like, he actually dropped to one knee, holding that little ring like it was the crown jewels or something. Tara gave a half-hearted laugh, clearly uncomfortable. You didn't have to laugh, though. That was kind of harsh. Emily shrugged, sipping her latte like she was casually talking about bad weather. Please. He's so desperate to lock me down, he'd propose with a plastic ring if I asked. I've got him wrapped around my finger. I just need to string him along a bit longer, until Brandon's situation is sorted. My hands clenched under the table. My vision blurred at the edges. But I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. Tara leaned forward, clearly uneasy. You really think you can keep this up? Emily smirked. Jake's not going anywhere. He's sweet, but let's be real, he's just a safety net. Something stable to fall back on until the real deal is ready. She laughed again, but it was colder this time. Sharper. A sound I didn't recognize anymore. I couldn't breathe. She wasn't just uncertain. She wasn't confused or scared about commitment. She was playing me. Actively. Calculated. Deliberate. Like I was just a placeholder, a pit stop on her way to a more glamorous life. And I had been so blind. The rest of the conversation blurred into static. Something about their next girls' night out, a new dress she wanted to buy, and how Brandon makes her feel like a woman, whatever that meant. But my body was frozen in that moment, like time had stopped with her words echoing in my head. Safety net. String him along. Wait until Brandon's ready. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. It was the realization that while I was saving for our future, she was treating me like a spare tire. Eventually, they got up to leave. But before they did, Tara glanced around, and for a brief second, her eyes landed on me. Her face froze. She must have recognized me, but she didn't say anything. Just looked stunned, maybe guilty. As she passed my booth, she muttered under her breath, barely audible, "You deserve better." I didn't respond. Couldn't. I just stared down at my cold coffee, jaw tight, heart cracked wide open. That night, I sat alone in the apartment, lights off, the glow of the city flickering through the blinds. Pepper curled at my feet, occasionally lifting his head like he knew something wasn't right. I kept hearing her voice on repeat. That cold laughter. That smug confidence. The sheer lack of remorse in her tone. I had given this woman 3 years of my life. My time. My trust. My plans. I had imagined children with her. Vacations. Growing old. All of it, built on a foundation that she had quietly bulldozed while I wasn't looking. It was like mourning a death, but the corpse was still breathing in the other room. When she came home that night, she kissed my cheek like nothing happened. Asked if I wanted Chinese for dinner. Said she was in the mood for dumplings. I just nodded. And in that moment, something in me clicked. I realized I wasn't going to beg for love anymore. I wasn't going to confront her with empty accusations, only to hear her lie again. I wasn't going to ask her if Brandon was just a friend. I didn't need her to confess. I already knew everything I needed to know. She had made her move. Now it was my turn. I started thinking differently after that night. Sharper. Colder. Detached. Like someone who had survived a fire and come out the other side with scorched skin and steel beneath it. I smiled when she talked about ring shopping again. I kissed her forehead when she said she wanted to take things slow, but still see where we were going. I listened when she floated ideas about traveling next spring, all while secretly transferring half our joint savings into a separate account, documenting every message, every lie, every late-night return. If she wanted to play a game, I'd play it better. But I wouldn't just walk away. I was going to leave a memory she'd never forget. Once the emotional fog lifted, I started seeing everything with brutal clarity. I didn't want to play detective, but I also couldn't afford to stay in the dark anymore. If Emily was willing to laugh behind my back and string me along for another man, I needed to know exactly what and who I was up against. So I started digging. It began with small things. Casual questions cloaked in harmless curiosity. How's work lately? Any new projects? Who's on your team these days? She'd answer vaguely, always dodging names, redirecting conversations like a politician in a press conference. But I was paying attention now, to everything. I found the company's staff directory online. That's where I saw his full name, Brandon Wells, Senior Marketing Director. A few clicks led me to his LinkedIn. Tall, corporate polished, mid-30s. That smug profile photo said everything. I kept scrolling and felt a pit form in my stomach. He wasn't just her coworker. He was her boss's boss. I remembered the way she'd talk about late-night meetings and urgent strategy calls. How she'd come home with that look, not tired, but satisfied. Like someone returning from a secret. Suddenly, everything fit. The late hours. The sudden wardrobe upgrades. The glowing skin, the new perfume, the small but telling signs I'd been too naive to question. The worst part? This wasn't some fleeting flirtation. This was premeditated. There was structure behind the chaos, intention behind the lies. She wasn't just cheating, she was climbing. Leveraging me for comfort while chasing status with someone higher up the food chain. But I wasn't even close to the bottom yet. Because what I found next made everything I'd uncovered so far feel like the appetizer to a betrayal far more calculated than I ever imagined. I wasn't planning to go through her phone. I really wasn't. But one night, she passed out on the couch after a couple glasses of wine, and her phone buzzed in her hand. Unlocked. For a minute, I just stared at it, heart pounding like I was about to cross a line I couldn't come back from. But something deeper, something instinctual, pulled me in. A need to know. A need to protect myself from whatever storm I sensed was coming. What I found didn't just confirm my suspicions. It tore the floor out from under me. The messages between Emily and Brandon weren't just flirty or emotional. They were strategic. Full-on plans. Inside jokes I'd never been part of. Nicknames. Discussions about timing, cover stories, future logistics. They weren't sneaking around anymore, they were plotting a life together. The most gut-wrenching message came from her. Just need to keep Jake on the hook until after Maui. Once you and I come back, I'll end it. He's already thinking about proposing again anyway. Brandon replied. Perfect. Just play sweet for now. Don't give him a reason to suspect anything. By the time we're back, it'll be done. Maui. I checked her calendar. She had told me it was a marketing conference in Maui, company funded. I had even offered to come visit over the weekend. She said there'd be too many meetings and I'd be bored. The truth? They were going on a romantic getaway under the guise of business, planned down to the fake itinerary. Another message from her chilled me to the core. If he proposes again before we leave, I'll say yes. Fake it. Then break it off once we're settled. He'll be crushed, but whatever. That's on him for being so blind. I sat there for what felt like hours, unable to breathe. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a performance. A layered deception designed to buy time, secure comfort, and burn me at the end without flinching. She hadn't just broken my heart. She'd engineered my downfall like a business strategy. I didn't know how long I sat there staring at the screen, at the messages that felt like daggers dressed in emojis and empty affection. Each word was a fresh cut, every sentence proof that I hadn't just been lied to, I'd been used. The most twisted part wasn't even the affair itself. It was the way she talked about it. The cold strategy. The casual cruelty. The way she turned me into a backup plan, a temporary placeholder, like I was some weak-hearted fool she could string along until her next chapter began. She wasn't just cheating on me, she was mocking my love behind my back. Every kind gesture, every shared memory, every kiss, suddenly felt like a performance, rehearsed and recited. I scrolled further, more proof, more manipulation. Discussions about our joint bank account. Her telling Brandon she might pull out a little more to book a resort upgrade for Maui. Her laughing about how clueless I was, how I still think we're soulmates. And then came the last line that snapped something inside me. Honestly, I don't love him anymore. I just love what he provides. There it was, plain, brutal truth. Stripped of pretense. And in that moment, whatever was left of my innocence, disintegrated. I closed her phone, placed it back exactly where she'd left it, and walked into the bathroom to splash cold water on my face. My reflection stared back like a stranger, not the man I was weeks ago, full of hope and love, but someone harder now. Sharper. Numb, but aware. The kind of man who no longer begs for truth, because he already knows it. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat in the dark with Pepper curled beside me and made a decision. If Emily was playing a game, she had no idea who she was playing with. Because I wasn't going to confront her with words anymore. I was going to confront her with consequences. From that moment on, everything shifted. I didn't tell her I knew. I didn't hint, accuse, or even change my tone. If anything, I became more affectionate, warmer, softer, more agreeable. She thought I was still the same Jake, still spinning my wheels trying to make her happy. But beneath the surface, I was moving in silence. Observing. Recording. Strategizing. Because if she wanted to play games, I was going to play a longer, smarter one she'd never see coming until it hit her like a freight train. The first thing I did was secure my foundation. I transferred half of our joint savings into a new private account under my name. Nothing suspicious, just a temporary hold for tax planning, which I knew she wouldn't question since she never handled the finances anyway. Next, I started quietly searching for a new apartment. Nothing flashy, just a clean, furnished one-bedroom in a neighboring district. I signed the lease in secret, scheduled the move for a day I knew she'd be at work, and slowly began shifting personal items, important documents, electronics, sentimental belongings. Things I didn't want to risk leaving behind when the dust settled. Then came the documentation. Every message I had seen, I screenshotted. I organized them into folders, labeled by date and context, messages about the affair, financial misuse, Brandon's involvement. I even logged conversations we had where she lied to my face, recording voice memos after each exchange to keep my thoughts fresh and sharp. I wasn't just preparing to walk away. I was preparing to leave her no room to twist the story. Because I knew how people like Emily operate. They don't just betray you, they rewrite history afterward to play the victim. I wasn't going to give her that chance. I was going to take away every exit route, every loophole, every convenient excuse she could possibly use. She thought she was playing me like a pawn. But I was already moving like a king, and soon, she'd learn exactly what it feels like to be outmaneuvered in her own game. While I kept my tone gentle and my expression soft, behind the scenes I was becoming surgical. I started tracking patterns, timestamps, call logs, transaction histories. I wasn't just collecting evidence, I was creating a timeline. Every late meeting, every weekend brunch that turned out to be a lie, every purchase she made using our shared card. It was all lining up like puzzle pieces. I even pulled our phone records from the carrier. Her call log with Brandon was relentless, early mornings, late nights, sometimes when she was supposedly asleep next to me. And still, I said nothing. That was the hardest part, pretending. Acting like her morning kisses meant something. Smiling when she asked about dinner plans. Listening to her talk about feeling closer to me lately while knowing she'd been in someone else's bed the night before. It was psychological warfare, and she didn't even know she was on a battlefield. I'd leave subtle traps, leave my laptop open on a luxury jeweler's website, or casually mention that I'd been thinking about proposing again just the right way this time. Watching her eyes light up made me sick, but also told me the performance was working. She thought her plan was moving along perfectly. She had no idea I'd already rewritten the final act. But beneath the surface, I was running out of room to breathe. The act was exhausting. The silence heavier by the day. I knew I couldn't hold it much longer, and I didn't need to. Because soon, fate gave me an ally I never expected, one who had just as much to lose as I did, and even more reason to burn it all down. It happened by chance, or maybe karma finally decided to step in. One evening, after another soulless dinner with Emily, I sat in the living room scrolling through Brandon's social media. His profile was spotless, curated to a fault. But then I noticed a comment under one of his old posts, a woman named Lisa Wells. Her last name stopped me cold. A quick search confirmed it, Brandon's wife. I stared at her profile for a while, family photos, birthday celebrations, a caption about working through difficult seasons in marriage. She had no idea what was really going on behind her back. Just like I didn't, until recently. Something inside me clicked again. A different kind of resolve. I'd spent weeks collecting evidence to protect myself, but maybe I wasn't the only one who needed protecting. So I made a decision. I created a private email and sent her everything. No dramatics. Just facts, screenshots of Emily and Brandon's messages, plans for Maui, hotel bookings, the entire thread of their deceit. I expected silence, maybe denial. But instead, I got a reply less than 2 hours later. Her message was short but sharp. "Thank you. This explains everything. Can we talk?" We spoke the next day. Her voice cracked when she told me she'd had suspicions for months but never had proof. That Brandon had cheated before but promised he'd changed. That she'd been fighting for a marriage he'd already abandoned. We talked for nearly 2 hours, not as strangers, but as two people standing in the same emotional wreckage. And something strange happened. We didn't spiral into rage. We didn't plan revenge out of hate. We just understood each other. That understanding became the foundation of something stronger, a quiet alliance rooted in clarity, not chaos. Together, we started drawing a new plan. Not just to confront the affair, but to expose it in a way neither of them could ever deny or spin. And once it was set, there'd be no going back. Once Lisa and I aligned our timelines, everything started falling into place. We didn't want confrontation, we wanted clarity. Not a messy argument in a kitchen or a dramatic breakup behind closed doors. No. We wanted truth, exposed publicly, undeniably, and with precision. If Emily and Brandon had spent months scripting a fantasy behind our backs, then it was only fair we rewrote the ending ourselves. The first step was choosing the right moment, one they'd never expect, one that would amplify the impact. Emily had been pestering me about redoing the proposal, still floating suggestions with stars in her eyes. She'd drop comments like, "Maybe this time on the beach," or "What if you surprised me at that rooftop restaurant again, but better this time?" Every time she said it, she smiled like she already knew she'd won. So I used it. I told her I was planning something unforgettable, the proposal she deserved. That I'd made a reservation at the Crest, the most exclusive venue in town. I even told her I'd invited a few close friends and family for a post-proposal dinner. She was glowing, radiant with delusion, completely unaware that she wasn't heading toward a diamond ring, she was walking into a demolition site. Meanwhile, I was working behind the scenes. I reserved a private room at the Crest and coordinated everything down to the minute. But instead of rose petals and champagne flutes, the room was arranged with rows of chairs, a large projector screen at the front, and folders neatly stacked on each seat, each one holding printed evidence of what she and Brandon had done. I modified the guest list, quietly adding Lisa and a few trusted friends who'd always suspected something was off. I removed the live musicians she'd hinted at and replaced them with silence, the kind that rings louder than any music ever could. And when the night came, I wouldn't just be proposing something new. I'd be exposing everything she thought she'd buried. The night of the event arrived faster than I expected. Everything was in place, the room, the projector, the evidence folders. Even Lisa, dressed in a muted navy dress, had arrived early and sat near the back with a quiet, controlled calm that only made the moment feel even more surreal. I stood near the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived. Friends, co-workers, a few of Emily's relatives, all smiling, shaking my hand, asking excitedly, "Is this the night?" I nodded, keeping my smile steady, though inside I felt like my chest was made of stone. When Emily finally walked in, every head turned. She looked breathtaking. A sleek dress, full makeup, eyes bright with expectation. She beamed when she saw the setup, completely missing the strange layout of the room. She assumed it was just an unconventional arrangement for a more modern engagement experience. She kissed my cheek and whispered, "I can't believe you really did all this." I nodded. "You're right. You'll never forget tonight." Once everyone was seated, I stood in front of the room and took a breath. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I promised Emily something unforgettable tonight. Something honest, something real. So that's exactly what I've prepared." I nodded toward the technician, and the room darkened as the projector flickered on. The first image hit the screen, a screenshot of Emily's text to Brandon, "I'll say yes if he proposes again. Just play along. Then I'll ghost him once we're back from Maui." Gasps echoed around the room. Then came more messages about Brandon's situation, details about the trip they claimed was a work conference, hotel booking receipts, withdrawals from our joint account. Every piece lined up with a quiet, devastating rhythm. Emily's face shifted from confusion to horror to denial. She leapt to her feet, tried to speak, but the evidence kept rolling. Her lies, exposed in front of every person she'd fooled. And then, as if scripted by fate, Lisa stood and said, loud enough for all to hear, "By the way, Brandon's wife says hello." That was the moment Emily finally broke. For a few seconds, the room was silent, a heavy, stunned kind of silence that presses down on your chest and makes even the softest breaths feel deafening. Emily stood there, frozen in place, her face pale beneath the blush she'd so carefully applied. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Then, as if trying to salvage control, she erupted. "What is this?" she shouted, pointing at the screen. "This is insane. These are fake. You're manipulating everyone." Her voice cracked under the weight of panic, her composure slipping with every word. But the damage was already done. I stayed calm, standing in front of the room like I'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. "These aren't fake, Emily. This is your voice. Your words. Your choices." She turned toward the crowd, searching for someone, anyone, to take her side. Her parents stared at the floor, devastated. Her closest friends looked away, embarrassed. Even Tara, her longtime confidant, sat motionless in her seat, lips pressed tightly together, as if she already knew the truth but hoped it would never come to light. And then, as if fate had one more cruel twist to deliver, Emily's phone buzzed. Loud. Sharp. I didn't even need to check it, I already knew. She glanced at the screen. Her eyes widened. "Brandon." A preview of his message popped up clear as day. "Lisa knows. I'm done. I need somewhere to stay." The final thread snapped. Emily slumped back into her chair, completely hollow now, the game she thought she'd won crumbling around her. And I looked her straight in the eyes and said quietly, "You want it unforgettable? Congratulations, you got it." After that night, everything unraveled faster than even I expected. Emily tried to salvage what she could, with me, with her family, with the friends who had just witnessed her betrayal play out in high definition. But nothing worked. The damage was done, and this time, there was no lie clever enough to cover it. She called me 3 times the next morning. Left a voicemail in a shaky voice, saying she needed to explain everything, that things got twisted, and it wasn't what it looked like. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Brandon, predictably, didn't stick around. According to Lisa, who kept in touch with me occasionally afterward, he packed a bag and left the house the same night the messages came to light. He tried staying in a hotel at first, then reached out to Emily, but only because he had nowhere else to go. I think about how close I came to proposing a second time. About how easily I could have fallen for the same illusion if I hadn't followed my gut. If I hadn't overheard that conversation at the cafe. If I hadn't been brave enough to face the truth, even when it shattered everything I thought I knew. But now, I don't carry bitterness, just wisdom. Emily became a lesson. Not a wound. Not a ghost. Just a chapter that taught me how to recognize real love from manipulation disguised as affection. A chapter that showed me how strong I could be when I stopped choosing comfort over truth. I don't stalk her social media. I don't ask mutual friends how she's doing. She's no longer part of my story, just a page I turned, long ago. And as for me? I've built a life that's simple but mine. One rooted in peace, self-respect, and clarity. I don't look for revenge anymore. Because the real victory is waking up every day without fear, without lies, and without a single piece of yourself left to question. There's a moment in life when love stops being a fairy tale and becomes a lesson. Sometimes the person you give the world to turns out to be the one who teaches you what self-worth truly means. Not through affection, but through betrayal. Through the cracks in their mask. Through the silence after the storm. But here's the truth no one tells you: healing doesn't come from closure. It comes from clarity, from choosing peace over revenge, and growth over bitterness. If you've made it this far, maybe you've been through something similar. Maybe you've worn that same quiet pain, smiled through suspicion, or picked up the pieces of a future someone else casually discarded. And if so, I'll leave you with this. What would you have done if your love turned into your greatest lesson? Would you confront it head-on? Walk away quietly? Or would you do what I did, and let your silence become the loudest answer of all? Let me know in the comments. Your story might just help someone else reclaim their strength. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated, lied to, played, or left questioning your own worth, then remember this. The best revenge is peace and power. Not rage. Not drama. Just rebuilding your life so fully that no one who ever tried to break you can recognize the version of you that stands in the aftermath, wiser, sharper, stronger. So if you've ever had to choose between begging for love or walking away with dignity, like, comment, and subscribe, because strength like yours deserves to be heard. And trust me, they'll regret losing you long after you've forgotten they ever existed.